The aftermath didn't arrive with ceremony. It arrived with hesitation. In the hours after William and Catherine spoke those words, the palace did not respond with reassurance or denial. It responded with delay. And in institutions like this, delay is never accidental. According to reports, internal meetings stretched late into the night. Advisors debated not what had been said, but what could no longer be unsaid. Because once silence breaks publicly, control rarely returns fully. It only reshapes. For William, this moment marked a quiet crossing. Sources suggest he was no longer operating solely as heir, but as stabilizer in waiting. His tone changed. His schedule shifted. His presence carried a different weight. Not defiance, responsibility. The kind that comes when the future starts pulling closer than expected. Catherine's role changed even more visibly. Not in glamour, but in gravity. She was no longer framed as an image to be protected, but as a reality to be acknowledged. Reports claim senior figures finally understood that concealment was no longer sustainable, not emotionally, not institutionally. Behind closed doors, the conversation reportedly turned from optics to endurance. How much secrecy could the system still demand? And at what cost? Those questions, once hypothetical, now felt urgent. Public reaction followed a different rhythm. Support rose quickly, but so did uncertainty. Viewers weren't just reacting to emotion, they were reacting to implication. If something this serious had been hidden, what else had been quietly managed out of sight? The palace attempted restraint. Carefully worded statements. Neutral language. No escalation. But restraint after revelation often feels like evasion, and that perception matters. It's been said that institutions fear unpredictability more than criticism, and unpredictability had entered the frame, not because of scandal, but because of honesty, the most destabilizing force of all. Prince William's next appearances reflected that recalibration. No grand speeches, no explanations, just presence. Calm, measured. Observers noted how little he said, and how much that silence carried. Catherine, too, adjusted her approach. Sources suggest she declined certain engagements while quietly prioritizing others. Causes tied to health, to family, to resilience. Nothing overt, nothing confrontational, but unmistakably personal. This shift created a subtle tension, not between people, but between eras. The old model relied on endurance through silence. The emerging one hinted at endurance through transparency. Those philosophies cannot coexist comfortably for long. What happens next, according to royal watchers, depends less on emotion and more on alignment. Whether the institution chooses to adapt around this moment or absorb it and move on unchanged. There are reports of conversations about reform. Nothing formal, nothing announced, just exploratory thinking. The kind that surfaces when pressure exposes fault lines already there. And then there is time, the variable no one controls. As days pass, urgency fades, but memory doesn't. What was said becomes reference. What was shown becomes expectation. William and Catherine didn't offer resolution. They offered visibility. And visibility has consequences that unfold slowly, not instantly. The monarchy now stands in a familiar but uncomfortable place, between preservation and evolution, between habit and necessity, between what has always worked and what may no longer suffice. How it chooses to move forward will not be decided in one statement or 1 week. It will be decided quietly, through patterns, through who is listened to, through what is allowed to change. And that is why this moment matters more than it first appeared. Not because of drama, but because once a system is seen clearly, it can never fully return to shadow. If you want to stay with this story as it continues to unfold with context, restraint, and careful analysis, choose another video on your screen now. What the public didn't see immediately was how carefully that moment had been prepared. Not scripted, but contained. According to reports, the decision to speak openly was not made in haste. It followed weeks of internal strain, missed conversations, and a growing sense that silence was no longer protecting anyone. For Catherine, the cost of restraint had been accumulating quietly. Appearances grew more selective. Energy was rationed. Those close to the situation say she had reached a point where managing the image required more strength than confronting the truth. not dramatic collapse. Slow depletion. Prince William was facing a different pressure. Sources suggest he found himself pulled between roles that no longer aligned comfortably. Heir, husband, buffer between the institution and the person he shared his life with. That tension, when sustained, doesn't resolve itself. It forces choice. The palace, accustomed to managing narratives, reportedly underestimated how visible the strain had become. Small signals added up, timing changes, reduced access, carefully worded updates that answered nothing. To seasoned observers, these are not reassurances. They are placeholders. Public curiosity filled the gap, and curiosity, once activated, does not wait patiently. It's been said that the royal household prefers controlled ambiguity over clarity. Ambiguity buys time, but clarity, when it arrives, reshapes expectations. That recalibration is what made this moment different from previous cycles of speculation. Behind the scenes, advisors were divided. Some urged continued restraint. Others, according to reports, warned that prolonged silence risked misinterpretation that could not be undone later. Once narratives hardened externally, internal corrections rarely land. Catherine's voice during the statement mattered not because of what she disclosed, but because of how she spoke. Measured, human, unshielded, the tone suggested not defiance, but fatigue with concealment. That distinction resonated more deeply than any headline. William's presence alongside her carried equal weight. He did not lead the moment. He anchored it. Observers noted the absence of institutional language. No references to duty. No framing around tradition. Just acknowledgement. That departure was subtle, but significant. Afterward, the palace response was minimal. No follow-up briefing. No background clarification. Just silence. And silence, in this context, felt different. Less protective. More uncertain. Reports claim that internally, the focus shifted to containment rather than correction. How to prevent further speculation without appearing dismissive. How to respect the moment without validating every interpretation attached to it. Those are narrow margins to navigate. Meanwhile, public reaction continued to evolve. Initial shock softened into scrutiny. Viewers began replaying past moments through a new lens. Absences that once seemed routine now felt loaded. Statements that once sounded neutral felt incomplete. This retrospective awareness is difficult for institutions to counter. Once people start connecting dots, explanations arrive too late. Prince William's subsequent schedule reflected that awareness. Appearances were steady, but unembellished. No attempts to reclaim narrative ground, just consistency. In institutional terms, this signals confidence or acceptance, sometimes both. Catherine remained selective. According to sources, her priorities shifted toward recovery and family, not visibility. That choice, too, communicated something quietly powerful, that not every question requires immediate answer. What remains unresolved is not the content of what was said, but its implication that the traditional balance between privacy and presentation may no longer hold as firmly as before. And when that balance shifts, institutions don't respond with drama. They adjust gradually, through policy, through precedent, through what becomes normal next. The significance of this moment may not be visible yet, but it has altered the tempo. And once tempo changes, outcomes tend to follow. What changed next wasn't visible on a schedule or captured in photographs. It happened in the margins, in conversations not logged, in decisions that never reached press briefings. According to those who track the monarchy closely, the system began behaving as though a line had already been crossed. Not publicly, internally. Once candor enters a structure built on discretion, everything downstream shifts. Advisors recalibrate. Assumptions are retested. What once felt permanent suddenly feels conditional. That was the atmosphere surrounding the days that followed. For Prince William, this meant stepping into a role that hadn't been formally assigned but was increasingly expected. Not spokesman, not rebel, but bridge. Sources suggest he began absorbing pressure from both directions, translating institutional caution into personal reassurance, and personal resolve into institutional patience. That balance is fragile. Catherine's situation intensified the strain. Reports claim her recovery became not just a private concern, but a scheduling reality that forced reevaluation of long-standing expectations. Time away was no longer something to explain. It was something to plan around. The palace is adept at planning around absences. What it struggles with is unpredictability, and unpredictability had entered the equation through honesty, not scandal. That distinction made it harder to neutralize inside the system. Some reportedly argued that transparency would burn out quickly, that public interest would move on, that silence, once restored, would regain its authority. Others warned that something had shifted permanently, that the audience had recalibrated what it expected from the future of the monarchy. This division matters, because institutions don't change by consensus. They change when the cost of staying the same exceeds the cost of adaptation. Public behavior offered early signals. Viewers lingered longer. Commentators softened their language. Even critics framed concerns less as accusation and more as inquiry. That tone is difficult to dismiss. Prince William's posture reflected awareness of that change. His language grew simpler. Fewer abstractions, more presence. He avoided defensiveness. He avoided reassurance. Instead, he allowed space. That choice, according to observers, suggested confidence rather than retreat. Catherine's restraint carried its own message. She did not rush back into visibility. She did not clarify every implication. By declining to over-explain, she resisted becoming a symbol shaped by others. That refusal shifted leverage quietly back toward her. The palace, meanwhile, maintained procedural calm. But reports suggest contingency planning accelerated, not for immediate crisis, but for narrative longevity, how this chapter would be referenced in years to come, which phrases would survive, which would quietly disappear. Legacy is written through repetition. Another subtle change emerged in how the family appeared together. Proximity was selective. Optics were measured. Observers noted a reduced appetite for crowded symbolism, less emphasis on spectacle, more on function. That evolution signals something important. An institution prioritizing durability over display. Financial considerations entered the conversation as well, not scandalously. Strategically, scheduling affects funding. Visibility affects patronage. Absence affects expectation. These are practical realities, often overshadowed by emotion. Reports suggest they were addressed with unusual candor behind closed doors. The question of trust loomed throughout. Not trust in people, but trust in systems. How much autonomy could be tolerated without eroding coherence? How much flexibility could be granted without setting precedent? Precedent is the monarchy's quiet obsession. Every adjustment creates a template. Every exception invites comparison. That is why change arrives slowly, if at all. And when it does, it often arrives disguised as continuity. Prince William's role as future king placed him at the center of that tension. Sources suggest he began emphasizing alignment rather than obedience. A subtle shift in framing that allows evolution without rebellion. Catherine's influence reinforced that approach. Her priorities, health, family, authenticity, did not clash with duty so much as redefine it. That reframing resonated beyond the palace walls. Still, unresolved questions remained. What does transparency look like in an institution built on reserve? How much truth strengthens trust, and how much strains it? There are no manuals for this, only outcomes to study. Public attention, once ignited, does not dissipate evenly. It pulls, it revisits, it reframes. Past moments are reinterpreted. Old interviews feel newly relevant. Absences are remembered differently. That retrospective pressure is difficult to counter because it doesn't demand response. It demands consistency over time. The monarchy understands time better than any modern institution. It knows that weeks matter less than years, that storms pass but precedents linger. What makes this moment different is not the content of what was revealed, but the manner. Calm, measured, unforced. That tone resists dismissal. It invites consideration. And consideration, once extended, rarely retracts fully. As days passed, the absence of escalation became its own signal. No retaliatory briefings. No counter-narratives. Just adjustment. Quiet, methodical, deliberate. That is how institutions adapt when they sense the ground has shifted beneath them. They don't announce change. They absorb it until it feels inevitable. Whether this moment marks the beginning of a broader transformation remains unclear. What is clear is that the old equilibrium has been disturbed. And when equilibrium shifts, outcomes follow. Not immediately, but inexorably. By this point, the monarchy was no longer reacting to a moment. It was responding to a trajectory. According to observers familiar with royal rhythms, the system had shifted into long-term mode, less about response, more about absorption. This is how institutions survive pressure. They don't confront it head-on. They let it settle, then quietly reshape around it. Inside the palace, sources suggest a language change first. Words like temporary and return were used less frequently. In their place came phrases tied to adjustment and future balance. These are not cosmetic changes. They signal acceptance that something fundamental has altered. Prince William's position within this recalibration became more defined, not elevated publicly, but clarified internally. He was no longer treated as simply the next in line. He was treated as a reference point. Decisions were weighed against how they would land under his eventual reign, not just the current one. That distinction matters. Catherine's role also continued to evolve, though in a different direction. Reports suggest her absence from certain traditional functions was no longer framed as a deviation. It was treated as a parameter, something to be respected rather than corrected. That subtle shift rebalances power without a single announcement. Observers noted how this affected tone across the institution. Fewer rigid expectations, more emphasis on sustainability. Not idealism, but realism. The understanding that endurance requires adaptation, even in systems built on continuity. Public perception mirrored this gradual adjustment. Initial intensity gave way to attentiveness. Viewers were no longer waiting for another statement. They were watching patterns. Who appeared, who didn't, what was prioritized, what quietly faded. Patterns tell stories institutions cannot control once they emerge. The palace's restraint continued. No attempt to reclaim narrative dominance. No aggressive clarifications. Just consistency. That choice, according to analysts, reflects a calculation that time, not rebuttal, would shape the lasting impression. This approach carries risk. Silence can stabilize, but it can also invite reinterpretation. The monarchy appears to have accepted that trade-off. Behind the scenes, contingency planning reportedly deepened, not for scandal, but for succession optics. How transition would be framed, how unity would be conveyed without overstatement. These conversations, sources say, were practical rather than emotional. Legacy planning rarely is. The question of authority hovered quietly, not authority as command, but as trust. Who the public believes speaks with authenticity. Who appears aligned with the future rather than defending the past. Prince William's public demeanor reflected that awareness. He avoided institutional language. He avoided defensiveness. Instead, he leaned into steadiness, presence without pressure. That approach allows confidence to build organically. Catherine's influence remained more understated, but no less significant. By prioritizing boundaries, she implicitly challenged long-standing expectations without confrontation. That challenge, because it was calm, became harder to dismiss. What this created was a slow reorientation, away from performance, toward credibility. Institutions can withstand criticism. What they struggle with is erosion of belief. That is why credibility becomes a currency of survival during transition. The monarchy appears to understand this. It is adjusting not to appease, but to endure. Still, uncertainty remains. How far adaptation will go, whether this recalibration becomes permanent or remains provisional, whether the next phase consolidates these changes or absorbs them quietly into tradition. Those answers will not arrive quickly. They will emerge through repetition, through what continues and what does not return. Time once again becomes a deciding force. What is clear is that the system is no longer operating under the assumption that silence alone guarantees stability. That belief has been tested, and when core assumptions shift, institutions either fracture or evolve. For now, evolution appears to be the chosen path. Quiet, controlled, incomplete. The final shape of that evolution remains unresolved, but the direction has been set. What remains now is not fallout, but formation. According to those watching closely, the monarchy is in a phase where outcomes matter more than explanations. The loudest moment has passed. What follows is quieter and more consequential. This is where institutions reveal who they are. Prince William's path forward appears increasingly deliberate, not accelerated, but clarified. Sources suggest he has begun operating with an awareness that trust, once gained, must be maintained through consistency rather than reassurance. That means fewer gestures, fewer corrections, more continuity. Catherine's presence or absence continues to redefine expectations. By choosing when not to appear, she has reframed visibility as intentional rather than obligatory. That choice signals a future in which boundaries are not hidden, but normalized. It also signals a monarchy learning to accommodate reality rather than polish over it. Inside the palace, reports claim the language of inevitability has replaced the language of control, not surrender, acceptance. Acceptance that the audience has changed. That patience is thinner. That credibility now outranks ceremony. This shift has subtle effects. Advisory voices evolve. Priorities reorder. What once felt immovable becomes negotiable. Not publicly, internally, where it matters most. The public, too, is adjusting. Attention has not faded. It has matured. Viewers are no longer waiting for another reveal. They are watching for coherence, for alignment between words, actions, and time. That kind of scrutiny is harder to manage because it doesn't demand spectacle. It demands consistency. The monarchy understands consistency. It has survived precisely because it knows how to wait, how to absorb change until it feels organic, how to let controversy age into context. But aging requires movement. Standing still invites erosion. What makes this moment distinct is that the pressure is not external alone. It is generational. Expectations are shifting beneath the institution, not just against it. And generational pressure reshapes systems slowly but permanently. Prince William's steady presence suggests an awareness of that reality. He is not arguing with the moment. He is preparing for what comes after it. That posture, forward-facing rather than defensive, signals an institution beginning to look beyond immediate repair. Catherine's influence reinforces that trajectory. By prioritizing health, family, and authenticity without declaration, she has modeled a version of duty that does not rely on self-erasure. That example, once visible, cannot be unseen. Together, they represent not rupture, but recalibration. Whether the monarchy fully adapts remains an open question. Institutions rarely transform cleanly. They compromise. They absorb. They evolve unevenly. But the direction is clearer now than it was before the silence broke. The future of the crown will not be decided by one statement or one season. It will be decided by what becomes routine, by what is repeated without explanation, by which values are reinforced quietly over time. That process is already underway. What viewers sensed in that moment was not drama, but disclosure, not scandal, but shift, a recognition that the old equilibrium no longer holds, and that pretending otherwise carries its own risk. The monarchy is moving forward, carefully, selectively, with an eye toward durability rather than applause. And in that movement, the most important changes may never be announced at all. If you want to stay with the story as it continues to unfold, slowly, quietly, and with lasting consequences, choose another video on your screen now.